Live a little here in Chestandia, Romania, across the street from the fortified church of Chestandia, and one of our favorite backdrops there. We're looking at Daniel, and we're going to start with verse 15 today. We've talked a little bit about Hannibal, I think last time, and talked about the king of the north, and which we're always talking about the king of the north and king of the south. We're into up to the time of Antiochus III, who's called the Great, not to be confused with his son, who was Antiochus Epiphanes. We mentioned also, we talked about how the Jewish people and the promised land there, Jerusalem was for many years, hundreds of years, back and forth between the control of either the king of the south or the king of the north, either the Seleucid kingdom or the southern Ptolemy kingdom of Egypt. And so most of the time it had been Egypt controlled there, but here we see that Antiochus III comes on the scene, and things are beginning to change some. So let's pick up in verse 15, and it says, "So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mountain, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed." According to secular historians, the most fortified city in that area at that time was Caesarea Philippi. And so that would be speaking of at least Caesarea Philippi. This talks about plural here. I know some translations is singular, most fenced city, but either way, that would have been Caesarea Philippi if there were more than those others around. And so this was captured by Antiochus III in 198 BC, and again, Antiochus III was also known as Antiochus the Great. Phoenicia and the glorious land remained under Syrian control now. Once he took it here in 198 BC, it remained in Syrian control for the next 135 years until Pompey of Rome invasion of 63 BC. And if I said AD back there on 198, it's BC, of course. Not sure what I said. Antiochus III and Leotis III gave birth to Antiochus Epiphanes and also Cleopatra first, Cleopatra I. Now we talked about Cleopatra of Macedon. That's a different one, and that was Alexander the Great's sister. So here we're sometime later, and we're talking about Cleopatra, another Cleopatra named after her. And so that's going to be significant as we get into verse 17 then. It says, "He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom. Upright ones with him, thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him." Let me back up just a little bit. I kind of hurried on there. I'm going to spend a little more time, just a couple things on verses 15 and 16. We see that Antiochus III did greatly strengthen the kingdom of the Seleucids. And we've got four major powers going on along this same time, or we did have, because just Carthage has just recently been eliminated pretty much. And so Rome had finally defeated Carthage. Now, Rome was actually the new power on the block. Carthage was founded actually before Rome was, and it's founded by the Phoenicians from the area of Tyre and Sidon, and so they had founded that. And Carthage then had settlements on Sicily, and that was one of the major conflicts that Rome began to make inroads with. That's where the conflicts came in at, because Rome wanted their share. The Greeks had some settlements on the other side of Sicily, and so now you have Rome then wanting to come into play, and they wanted their cut. And so they're all vying for power there. Of course, Greece itself is kind of a declining power. Still strong, but declining. But we see that then once Hannibal was defeated, after he had free reign of southern Italy for 15 years, Rome couldn't do anything with him. And so they finally started going back to take the silver mines in Spain that Hannibal took earlier. And then they sent troops to Carthage. And so Hannibal was recalled and at that time. And many people are inclined to believe that Carthage just did not give Hannibal the support he needed to finish the job on Rome. And of course, they paid for it later because Rome became a power that was, like I say, they defeated him. They did let Hannibal continue to work in the government of Carthage. It was seemed to be I haven't really looked to see it as a republic, and so we see that he was part of that government. Hannibal was, as people would go back then, the generals and kings and these emperors, it was a ruthless time. But compared to the rest, Hannibal was seemed to be a reasonably honest man, and had a certain amount of honor. Now, anytime in war at that time, as always, a lot of atrocities went on. Many civilians died innocently. That was just the nature of war at that time, before Christianity came on the scene. I'm convinced that has made the biggest difference in society today. That's the reason we've been a civilized, basically, society. I wonder sometimes if we still are. I question it a lot. But at any rate, it definitely was not back then. And so Hannibal was trying to clean up some of the corruption in Carthage. And you know how that goes. They had their own deep state. And so they turned Hannibal in and told Rome he was trying to get Antiochus III to attack Rome and tried to incite that. And so Hannibal found out that Rome was sending some people to Rome to check on it, and he decided it's time for him to leave. And he may have been, who knows, he may have been trying to stir up Antiochus, but that is where he eventually ended up at. It was in his court at Ephesus, Antiochus III. And so at that time, we'll see then that going back to Antiochus III here, that taken in these most fenced cities, in verse 16 it says, "But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will," and that was talking about Antiochus III. "And none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land which by his hand shall be consumed." The glorious land there, of course, is talking about the promised land there in Jerusalem and Israel. So we see that it says, "None shall stand before him." That's a phrase that we've seen over and over, and we'll probably see it again before we get through with the book of Daniel. And it's very true. When God gave these men power to come in, and God didn't, make them do the evil that they did, but they did that on their own. But God gave them power to bring down the other tyrant, and then they became the tyrants, and so God raised up another tyrant to take care of that. But anyway, the thing is that each one of them in their own right at the time could not be stopped. None shall stand before him. But having said that, there did come a time that every single one of them did meet their end, just like any other man. And so a lot of times it was without battle, it was without the hands of man, it was the hand of God. Or either, God worked things out through some other area. But many assassins, many poison. It was not a good time to be of royal blood back in that day, an earthly royal blood. Thank God my royal blood is in heaven. So, but according, we'll see there that he had pretty much free reign for a while until Rome came on the scene. And verse 17, it says, he shall also set his face to enter, and we read that, but let me read it again, with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. And I mentioned Cleopatra the first a while ago, Cleopatra 1. This is her right here. He shall give him the daughter of women. Antiochus III gave his daughter to the king of the southern kingdom, the Ptolemaic kingdom, and he gave his daughter to the son of the king of the south in marriage at the age of 14. Now, it was not consummated at that time, but that was when the betrothal was made at the age of 14. But it says, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. See, Antiochus III's goal was, he had pretty much had free reign of Egypt. He was just about ready to put Egypt away and absorb them into his kingdom. But he thought to finish it off by this giving his daughter in marriage, and then through her influence, then he would gain control of Egypt. But it backfired on him. That's where it says, she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. She turned against her dad and stood with her husband, Ptolemy the Fifth. And so that left Egypt still standing. It says he is still referring to Antiochus III, who gave his daughter Cleopatra I in marriage to Ptolemy the Fifth. And so her loyalty was to her husband, not to her dad, as he had wanted to be. Now, verse 18, let's go on. It says, after this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall, verse 19, he shall turn his face toward the ford of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, not be found. And so here we're still talking about Antiochus III. So we read there the last few words. He'll stumble and fall and not be found. Like I say, each one of these people that could not be stopped, they were unstoppable. The time did come when they were stopped. And so each one will meet their doom eventually. But we see he turned his face to the isles. He began to go into Greece and try to take some of that territory, and he was successful with that. Like I say, Greece was a kind of a waning power at this time, still fairly strong, but a waning power, and it was getting to the place they were no match for Rome, or on the eastern side, the Seleucid Empire, the old Persian Empire. And so they were kind of caught in between. And so you had Rome coming at them from one side, and here Antiochus is going at them from the eastern direction and coming in from that way. And so that's, of course, there's quite a few isles there in the Greek area belong to Greece. And he said, shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. What's that talking about? It seems that this Roman consul or general, which named Lucius Cornelius Scipio and Asiaticus, had been insulted by Antiochus III. Antiochus III was an arrogant man, as most of the world and rulers of empires are. And so he insulted this general, the consul of Rome. I'm not sure if it was before or after. I think the Battle of Thermopylae had already been fought, and Antiochus III lost that battle, and now he's meeting this one that he's insulted before, and again he loses, this time at a place called Magnesium. And so there's a big defeat for him. So this is the one that he reproached, and the one he reproached caused that reproach to cease when he defeated, won a great victory there at Magnesia against Antiochus the Great. And so that was also a defeat again for Hannibal, because Hannibal had come in and was evidently advising, I think, Antiochus III. Antiochus III evidently did not think he needed any military advice. Now, here's the greatest general, probably looking back on history, one of the greatest generals that ever lived. And yeah, Antiochus is arrogant enough to not want his military advice. So what he does, he puts Hannibal in charge of his navy. Well, Hannibal never had any naval experience, and so when they met the Roman fleet at the same time that the Battle of Magnesia was being fought, then the Romans defeated Hannibal's navy there, and then they defeated Antiochus III's army on the ground. And so as a result, it says in verse 19, then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. Antiochus III attacked Greece, as we said, was defeated. He agreed to pay tribute to Rome, and Rome had demanded Hannibal, that he surrender Hannibal to him, but Hannibal was already gone. Hannibal had made his escape, and he lived to fight at least one more time, and again in a naval battle, which he did win. 2 years later, he was killed. This is Antiochus III, trying to get enough tribute money together to pay Rome. He was killed by an angry mob in Luristan while pillaging a temple of Baal at Elymais, Persia. And I understand that's somewhere in the eastern part of the kingdom there, that he was going to try to. That's what he's doing, trying to rob temples, and that's what they did when they got desperate. The wealth of the temples, they would raid and raise the money that they needed to pay the tribute to Rome. Rome evidently had a high price that they charged, protection money, I guess you'd say. So verse 20, let's go on. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. So Antiochus the third had a son named Seleucus Philopator, Seleucus the fourth Philopator, and he succeeded his father. He decided to send his treasurer to plunder the Jewish temple in order to pay Rome. And even though he was successful, soon after he died, and many speculate he may have been poisoned. And it's a good possibility his half-brother, Antiochus Epiphanes, may have had something to do with that somehow. What had happened when, I said earlier that Rome had demanded Hannibal be surrendered. When Antiochus was unable to surrender Hannibal, Rome demanded his son, evidently. At some point anyway, they demanded his son, Antiochus III, to be held hostage in Rome. And so somehow now we see, and we'll end here, we'll open up with verse 21 next time, and that will bring in this evil man. Some people said, well, I saw an article, historical article, somebody tried to write here a while back saying, well, he wasn't really that bad. Well, right here the Word of God calls him a vile person in verse 21, and so that's what he was. He somehow, and he is the forerunner of the Antichrist that will come, did almost exactly the same things that we expect the Antichrist to do, only the Antichrist will be far worse. And he offered swine on the altar in the temple, and all kinds of vile things that he did. Slew many of the Jewish people, hated them, and we'll get into that next time as we begin to look at him. But somehow he, through flatteries or through guile, he persuaded Rome. The one that would be next in line to be king would have been Seleucus IV, or excuse me, after Seleucus IV died, would have been his son, and but he was very young. I don't know what age he was, but all we know is he was very young, and Antiochus persuaded Rome that he was his nephew's protector. And so somehow Rome trusted Antiochus, and he persuaded them, and that's what it says about him. And the Antichrist will be very persuasive, charismatic, and speak great swelling words, and so they'll be able to fool people. And so he talked them into taking his nephew hostage while he took the kingdom of the Seleucids. And then finally he just kept it, never gave it back. Usually when that happens, a lot of times when the rightful heir gets old enough, then they take the kingdom then and reign as king. But Antiochus never allowed that to happen. Antiochus Epiphanes, no way he would. So like I say, that wraps it up for this part, and we'll get into this Antiochus Epiphanes, this abomination of desolation that he sets up, and the Bible talks about that, and that's at least a twofold happening, and maybe three. Some say Titus, the Roman general, did the same thing in 70 AD, and so you've got two forerunners in a sense of the Antichrist. But Antiochus Epiphanes is one of the better known, and because just everything he did just fit the same. It's almost impossible to, I mean, it's not, but I say almost, to separate where one begins and the other ends as in the following verses in the rest of the chapter. You could almost say that you've got two people that are being talked about that's thousands of years apart from here to the end of the chapter, but there is a separation point that we could make. It's not easy to spot necessarily, but even then, still there's a lot of overlap where a lot of things that's said about one is also true of the other. And so we'll get into that next time, and we'll start looking at that and how the depiction of the Antichrist that's to come can be seen in this evil man. Dale Little here in Chestnut, Romania.